So what they're going to do is the center is going to offer what they call offer a mandala, which meaning, and if you don't know the Indian Buddhist cosmology, you know, we just think of all the marvelous things that we use in the world, really. Think about it. Mandala is just meaning where you live. It's your abode, you know. So here, this is the abode of us. All piling up all the marvelous things and offering as a request to the Buddha as a request for the teachings, just like that. Okay.
Can you hear me?
So with the prayers on, yeah, here it is here. So yeah, okay.
Sajipu. Wait.
Okay. And that's representing the universe. It looks like
Sajipu ki jushing meto tram virabli nidegen padi.
And now we're offering the representations of enlightened body, speech, and mind, so we can achieve those ourselves. Go on. Engaging. There you go. Okay. And then we think Buddha very happily accept our offering. Idam Guru Ratna. No, the next one. You've got to do the next one. You've got to do the next one.
Let's do the next one. We
Before
can do
that.
this in English. O holy and perfect pure Lama,
From the
clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release the rain and vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with those
the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. That's it. And now I will sing a prayer. Next one. The first two lines are expressing our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings, and the second two lines, when it comes, is stating our motivation. The Tibetans would say stating our motivation for why we're here together. We might say stating our purpose. What's our goal? Why are we here? So the second two lines are expressing that, and here's sort of this altruistic, long-term motivation, goal, kind of saying we're listening to these teachings so we can take the advice from it, so we can develop our amazing potential, become a Buddha, and be of benefit to others. That's the long-term purpose. We make it like that. Sangye charang soke tognam la jang chubaru dagmi kyap suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki rola penche sangye dropasho sangye charang soke tognam la jang chubaru dagmi kyap suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki rola penche sangye dropasho sangye charang soke tognam la Jangchu Badu Dagmi Kyap Suchi, Dagi Chonyen Gipe Sonam Ki, Drola Penchir, Sange Dropasho. Okay. Give me all that. Okay. There's Kimberly. Kimberly's in Canada. She's in hospital. She's still alive. She's supposed to be dying, right? Kimberly, you're supposed to be dying. Kimberly?
Yes, I am dying. Yes. I
can't hear you.
Yes, I'm dying.
They call you dying, do they? And you're getting ready. You're ready for death, Kimberly?
Yes, I'm in palliative care.
But you're ready for death?
I'm a little frightened, but I'm ready.
Sweetheart, people are taking care of you?
The nurses and doctors are taking beautiful care of me.
Good,
Yes.
darling. I'm so happy. Good, sweetheart.
Yes. Yeah. I'm taking.
We're all here.
Yes.
Good,
Thank
darling.
you so much. I'm happy to be supported by everyone. Thank you.
Good, sweetheart. Good, good, good. Jane in Hawaii. Lou in the chair. Robert, I don't know where Robert is. Where are you, Robert? Where are you? I forget. Where you live? What part of the world are you in?
I'm in Gilbert, Arizona.
Who?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix, Arizona. Okay. And there's Nimani Fisher there in Bali. Very good. We're all here. There's Jai in South Australia. I was going to say South Africa. Good. And we're here in Santa Fe. Okay. And there's me in my picture in my house in New York with Buddha. The second one, you see. There it is. That's the one. You got two of me. Okay. I don't know why. Because it feels closer. I like being close up so you can see my wrinkles. My rinks, Lama Yeshe would call them my rinks. You rinks, got rinks. Okay, people, so here we are. We're going to, what's the topic again? Chocolate. When the chocolate runs out. It sounds very funny, doesn't it? There's a book of Lama Yeshe's they put together, Wisdom published. So basically it's saying, what do we do when attachment stops getting what it wants? In other words, what do we do when the dramas happen? That's what it means. So we better look at what Buddha means by all this, because we know what happens when the dramas happen. We have panic attacks and anxiety and anger and despair and grief and loss and don't know what to do, you know. Really, because we know that, and this is what we mean by suffering. This is what we mean by suffering, isn't it? So basically what Buddha's got is an interpretation. What Buddhism is really an interpretation of suffering. And then his methods of how to stop it. Basically, that's it. That's it. You know. And so he presented that after he got enlightened in Bodh Gaya. He sort of meandered his way a few days to Varanasi, this place called Deer Park, and he gave his first teaching, you know. I think his previous students, 5 of them, who they kind of, when they saw him coming, they kind of rejected him because they thought he'd given up the path as he sort of shifted his direction. And he was in Bodh Gaya and got enlightened, and he went there and he gave the teaching. Four Noble Truths. Basically, it's the basic nuts and bolts of Buddhist teachings. And it's framed in terms of suffering. But I mean, another way, it sounds nicer. You can flip it over and say it's a method of how to get happy. Before we go into the details and attachment and not getting what it wants and all this stuff, I think it's really helpful to look at this idea of happiness and suffering, what it means. And there's such words we are so familiar with, you know. But it's really interesting to hear Buddha's very clear analysis of what suffering and happiness are. Which, of course, we need to do if we want to try, because the first noble truth is there is suffering. The second one is, guess what, folks? There are causes. So we better know what he means by it, you know? We better know what he means by it. And then we'll look at the causes. And then he says he's found a method, he's found that it's possible to rid the mind of suffering, rid our lives of suffering and its causes. And the fourth one is the methodology, how to do it, you know. So clearly we better know what he means by this. So actually, happiness and suffering are actually functions of the mind. We can say that, you know, we can, whereby Buddha frames the suffering of 3 kinds of suffering, 3 levels of suffering. The first kind, speaking very simply, he calls it the suffering of suffering. And basically that's, as far as we're concerned, that's when the bad things happen. We know that, when bad things happen to us, you know, because we've got a mind. The main causes for the Buddha are in the mind. We're going to get to that. For the Buddha, the main cause of the universe, the main cause of rebirth, the main cause of happiness, the main cause of suffering, the main cause of animal realms, human realms, Lord knows what. As far as Buddha's analysis is concerned, comes down to the mind. It's not the only thing, but it's the mind, the main cause, the main one. That's why his main emphasis is working on your mind. So we can say that suffering and happiness are words used to refer to different states of mind. So to understand that, and you need to understand the Buddhist, the very simple way we present the mind, the Buddha's view of the mind, the contents of the mind, our mental consciousness. And then we've got sensory consciousness. So we can have experiences of suffering through our sensory consciousness. You stub your toe. That's a tactile consciousness, isn't it? And then pain comes. Well, pain is another word for suffering. That's all. And then if someone, you know, if you taste a nice cup of tea, you're looking forward to your tea, and the tea meets the tongue consciousness, and it triggers a pleasant feeling, happy feeling, pleasant feeling through the tongue consciousness. We understand that. And that's very precise, very clear. But then we've got the mental consciousness. We have the mental consciousness. And in order to understand Buddhism, we've got to understand this distinction. This is a huge distinction, you know. But in our world, we tend to think of ourselves as this big lump of me, you know. Usually we mean the body. We know we have thoughts, but the body runs the show. We make the body the boss. We make our sensory experiences. They really run us, don't they? And we can be forgiven for having that happen, because the second we wake up in the morning, the first thing we experience is the sensory consciousness, as the five senses coming back to awake, and then the objects of our five consciousness, in sensory consciousness, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, and the touch, isn't it? So that's our entry into the world, is through the senses. So of course they're huge for us. So then we've got the mental consciousness, which basically is interpretations of the sensory world. If you think about it, it's a very simple way to put it. You know, my eye consciousness goes to this cup, and I will say, what a pretty cup. But my eye consciousness doesn't see a pretty cup. It's not capable. All it does is see shape and color, bare bones. The senses actually are very basic in their experiences. They're very powerful. The pleasant and unpleasant feelings in the sensory consciousness in relation to the body are very powerful for us. They're tremendously powerful. We've got to understand how the mind functions. So eye consciousness can only cognize shape and color. So the next billionth of a second, the millisecond my eyes go there, then my mental consciousness, which is where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says, is accessed. And then out of my mouth will come some words. Oh, what a pretty cup. So, of course, we assume that our eyes are seeing a pretty cup. No, not possible. Your mental consciousness comes up, a thought, or everything's stored in our mind, you see. This is an interesting point for the Buddha. Since beginning of this time, our mind has been going, as weird as it sounds to us, and everything we've ever experienced stays in the mind, is stored in our mind, which is why we can have clairvoyance and remember the past. So I've stored in my mind all these opinions, haven't I, about things? And then out of my mouth comes an opinion. What a pretty cup. That's a concept. It's a thought. So we've got the sensory consciousness, and then we have the mental consciousness. And that's where the workshop is. And that's what we have to learn to understand. That's Buddha's expertise, you know? So we've got the grosser level, which is the level we function at only. And that's called conceptuality, thoughts, including all the emotions. But then we have these subtle levels, which these genius Indians, well before the Buddha, discovered with their amazing samadhi technique that enables you to plumb the depths of your own subjective cognitive process itself, your mind itself, your non-physical process of cognition, not the brain, a much subtle level beyond the brain, which we eventually have to access and these Indians invented this technique, we get single pointed, subtle focus in your mental consciousness. And that's what they used to investigate their own mind. They learned about their own minds. And that's the model of the mind. So the Buddhist model of the mind doesn't come from looking at a brain. It comes from looking into your own mind. So we have the sensory and we have the mental. And we need to distinguish between them. It's tremendously powerful. So important if you want to be a Buddhist, you know, just in life. You know, you stub your toe. That's a sensory experience. And all the tactile consciousness can feel is certain kind of bare bones experiences, rough, smooth, whatever. So then because it triggers the feeling in the mind, what happens is the toe, the sensory consciousness doesn't say that is the table bumping into my toe. Your mental consciousness comes up and has an opinion and says, oh my God, look at that. And then anger comes in. Anger's in the mental consciousness as well and has an opinion. How dare that happen to me? I don't deserve it. You know, anger. They're all in the mental consciousness. They're in the mental consciousness. So the mental consciousness consists of positive and negative states of mind, neurotic, delusional, I-based, fear-based, all the emotional afflictions, Buddha calls them, all the misconceptions, the philosophical views about the self, about permanence, about karma, about creators, all Buddha's presentation of how the universe exists. So he's suggesting we have all these misconceptions in our mind. It's his view. He's telling us what he thinks is true based on his own experience. So all these misconceptions, including all the mental afflictions, the emotional, the painful states of mind. And then you've got the positive states of mind, the valid ones, the virtuous ones, the useful ones, the valid cognitions, the valid concepts. The third lot are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, but they're like the mechanics of our mind. And it's really important to understand these. One is called mindfulness, which is, we make it something kind of holy. It's not holy. Thieves need mindfulness, as Lama Zopa says. It's the ability to keep your mind on track, not losing, not forgetting what you're doing. That's the function of mindfulness. There's another one called intention, bare bones volition, I will. It's neither negative nor positive. You've got concentration. You've got discrimination, and the ability of your mind every millisecond to discriminate between this and that, and color and shape and sound, and billions, so much of it, so many of these that enable us to function. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need those to function well. But it's the negative ones and the positive ones that are the source of our suffering and our happiness. And why? The Buddha says is because the negative ones are not in touch with reality. They cause us to live in la-la land. So they are all these emotional afflictions and deluded states of mind. Then you have the positive ones. Now, in that other category, the third lot, I like to call mechanics, there's this other one. This is a big surprise to us. This other one, it's called feeling. If you look at the Buddha, he taught the 5 aggregates. He gave a teaching where he divided the components of a person into 5 pieces, 5 aggregates, 5 bits that make up a person. Okay. First one is form, which is the physical. Then he says feeling and discrimination. These are 2 of these crucial states of mind in this third category, the mechanics, that play a massive role in our lives. He gave them special status. And then the next lot is this grab bag of leftover bits and pieces, all the other states of mind. And the 5th one is called consciousness, which is the mind in general, okay? So in this one, the feeling is a really interesting one to understand. It's not the way we use the word feeling. We use that as an equivalent of an emotion. That's not the way they use that word here. There's only 3 kinds of feeling. These are neither negative nor positive. They're just what they are. There's 3 kinds only, and there's one that's called pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, and neutral. Well, forget the neutral, okay? Forget them. We've got the pleasant and unpleasant. And you think about it, every sentient being spends their lives trying to get the pleasant ones and trying to avoid the unpleasant ones, because they are other words for happiness and suffering. Happiness and suffering. So they finally come down to the mind. And the sensory, so you experience them in the sensory consciousness and you experience them in the mental consciousness. So Buddha's saying he's found a method to get happy feelings all the time. He's found a method to stop suffering feelings. But he also uses these words in terms of the external world. But the pleasant feeling is not, so you would say when you put the cake in the mouth, it does trigger a pleasant feeling. You say that, you can say that. But our view is the cake is the main cause of that pleasant feeling. So Buddha doesn't argue that it doesn't play a role. It does, because we are these sensory beings. But the way he'd put it is the cake is merely a catalyst to get a pleasant feeling. But when we think of happy feelings tell me about your happiness, Mary, or she'll describe the cake. Because we believe the cake is almost like it is the happiness. Not only is it the cause of that pleasant feeling, but as far as we're concerned, the cake is the happiness. If you think of your boyfriend that you're in love with, all you think of is the boyfriend. You don't think of the happy feelings. You visualize the boyfriend. He is the happiness. So you can argue, and Buddha agrees, that in the way our karma ripens, we're going to go into this, we can have things that happen on the outside. Well, you've got the karma due to past non-killing, for example. You will be born with a healthy body. That's physical. The body's external. You'll be born with no thought to kill. You'll be born with, and you'll meet people who are always nice to you and kind to you and don't want to harm you and don't want to kill you and won't harm you or kill you. They're external things. They are the catalysts that trigger these feelings in us of happiness and suffering. So Buddha's found a method to get happy feelings all the time. Now that sounds a bit hysterical to us. It sounds exhausting, because when we think of happiness, we kind of hyperventilate and think of kind of bliss and joy, and it's too exhausting to hear about that. It seems weird, And all he's saying is he's found a way to get happy feelings that don't depend upon the sensory objects, that don't depend upon boyfriends and cakes. Because basically right now what he's saying is we're driven by the main delusion in the first lot of states of mind called attachment, this bottomless pit of dissatisfaction, this emotional hunger that always wants something more, that is never feeling I've got enough, and even never feeling I am enough. No matter how much my boyfriend tells me he loves me, it's never enough. My money is never enough. How often I change my body, the nose this way, the nose that way, the eyes this way, that way, boy, girl, changing my gender, whatever it is, it's not being political. We are never satisfied. We have terrible dissatisfaction. That's the main emotional pain of attachment. And it's from the Buddhist perspective, from having practiced it for countless lives. And it's just our habit, you know. So that attachment causes us to believe that I've got to get the outside objects in order to get the happy feeling. Because otherwise, we don't know how to do it otherwise. Think about it. If we were deprived of our 5 senses objects for one day, we would go mad. We would go mad because we absolutely are addicted to the 5 sense objects. It's obvious, which is the outside world, people, things, sounds, smells, and tastes. So what we mean by the first kind of suffering, the Buddha, is when attachment doesn't get the nice things, when it gets the ugly things. That's the first kind of suffering. That we know. The lousy food, the pain in the knee, the mean husband, being abused, having no money. We understand this. And he gives us his analysis of why that's what that suffering is and where it comes from. And then how to stop it. That's the grossest level of suffering. So in other words, those external objects trigger because they're not what attachment wants. By definition, what the first kind of suffering is when attachment gets what it doesn't want. So what we mean in the world by happiness is when attachment does get what it wants. Nice boyfriends, pleasant cake, and so on and so forth. So they're the external things, but they don't have the character of happiness or suffering. Because the fact is, this cup doesn't have the character of being beautiful. Mary might, when she looks at that shape and color, she might think it's ugly. You know, that's why we have fights. So what appears to her through the lenses of her aversion is an ugly cup. What appears to me as a pretty cup is my attachment, over-exaggerating something. You know, the bare bones shape and color is just shape and color, you know. But we put all these stories onto everything in the universe. It's how we live our lives. So our method of getting happiness now, of getting the chocolate, that's how we think of getting happiness. No one questions it. It's the most normal thing on the planet. Birds and monkeys and dogs do it as well. Everybody. Buddha calls it samsara. He's not being fundamental to say we shouldn't have happy feelings. He's saying, hey, honey, child, I've got a method. You can't believe such happy feelings you can get if only you realized. But you got to give up attachment to get them. It's a bit tough. It's like we're all junkies, you know. He's telling us that the happiness of not being a junkie is much nicer happiness than getting the junk. It just sounds boring to us, you know. We want all the excitement and delicious objects and divine boyfriends. So happiness and suffering actually are sensory and mental feelings. Pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling. And they're just natural. Everybody, if you have a mind, then you have these. And all he's telling us is, if you like, all he's telling us is he has found that mind, your consciousness, has the natural potential to be blissfully, joyfully happy. It sounds too weird for us, you know. But that's what he's saying. And the method is to get rid of the delusions. The method is to rid the mind of the misconceptions and the delusions. That's his method. That's it. It's technical. So by understanding what happens in suffering are, first and most, it's the mind. They're mental and they're called feelings, and they're neither in the negative bad category nor in the neurotic virtuous, the virtuous good, the negative bad one, or the virtuous one. And that's why when we hear about pleasure, I mean, pleasure is another word for pleasant feelings. When we say pleasure, it feels like a sin, doesn't it? Oh, you can't smoke something that's pleasure. And I with respect, you know, when I was a Catholic, you know, you had to have God's permission to have sexual pleasure, isn't it? You had to call it marriage, and you're naughty if you didn't. Maybe that's so much pleasure. We're not allowed to have that much pleasure. You've got to have God permitting you to have it. I am being sarcastic. You didn't laugh at me. It was meant to be funny, but never mind. Now you laugh. Thank you. It's true, isn't it? You're not allowed to have that level of pleasure. You've got to have God make it as a sacrament, isn't it? I'm just talking, I'm just chatting. Okay. So the mind is the point. We have, and of course, and that's why Buddha would start, his most basic statement is, everybody wants happiness and nobody wants suffering. Everybody wants happiness and nobody wants suffering. And then when he talks about love and compassion, what love is, may you be happy. Love is wanting others to be happy. And compassion is wanting others not to suffer. They're tremendous. So we better know what he means by these things. If that's the case, because he's got very specific definitions and methodology of how to achieve these things, you know. So when the chocolate runs out, is basically means when your attachment doesn't get what it wants. And that's 1,000 times a day for all of us, but they needn't necessarily be dramatic. You know, you stub your toe, it's a very small event. Husband slurps his coffee. The light is red instead of green. You know, the food doesn't taste good. Little baby events. But this is that part of our tragedy is we don't pay attention to them. But why we should is because every time attachment, you see, the default assumption in the mind is, and it's so default we don't even give it a name until it doesn't get what it wants, is this assumption that I must only get the nice things. The only reason you get upset when you don't get the nice things is the only reason you get upset is because you were expecting things to be nice. We don't articulate it like that. We don't wake up in the morning, I hope I get lovely things. There's an assumption there that you damn well should, because you deserve it, you know. And the minute you stub your toe, you get upset. How dare that happen? The minute the hubby slurps his coffee, there he goes again, making me upset, you know. That's because attachment didn't get what it wanted. So the real one to understand is attachment. This bottomless pit of dissatisfaction. It's the main voice of ego. This is the root problem. The assumption in the first place, as far as Buddha is concerned, of this separate, concrete, set in stone me. That's the main suffering. That's even, I mean, if attachment is an assumption, this is the deepest assumption of all. But effectively in daily life, the Buddha says it in the Four Noble Truths, this attachment is the main cause of our suffering. And also causing suffering from life to life. And even the types of rebirth we get. I mean, this is, you know, we're not the handiwork of a creator. Buddha does not assert a creator, you know. So we have attachment and aversion. We go 1,000,000 times a day between them. And the trouble is in our culture, though, we only pay attention when they're really strong, when you're shouting and yelling in rage, or when you're despairing or having a panic attack, or utterly inert with depression. We then think I better sneak off guiltily to a therapist and get a pill, you know. But this is the tragedy. I always use the example, and it sounds so corny, but it's so true. When it comes to taking care of our car, taking care of our body, our teeth, our gardens, our houses, our possessions, we understand there are ways to maintain things. You maintain your car. You listen for the wobbles of the wheels and you rush off and you get the wheels fixed and aligned. You never wait till you're going 100 miles an hour on the freeway and go, uh-oh, my wheels are falling off. What'll I do? Nobody would do that. You have crashes and things, but no wheels ever fall off because we maintain our car. We maintain our body. We maintain our teeth. We don't have that for our mind. This is really true. We wait till the wheels fall off before we sneak off to the therapist. And then it's like it's too late, you know. You've got all this work to do to get yourself back to some basics. We wait till we have severe anxiety before we even realize what our mind has been doing for years and years and years because we've not paid attention. If you think about it, this is the greatest gift the Buddha can give us. Forget nirvana, forget Buddhahood, forget bodhicitta. Just keeping steady. He's given us skills to do this. It means paying attention to this mind of ours, but also more helpfully too, knowing what you're paying attention to, which you got by studying the Buddhist view of the mind. It's a very specific view. It won't come from the sky. You'll learn it if you're interested, you know. So when what arises in the mind arises, you can, there's anger, there's anxiety, there's jealousy, there's depression, and you know what to do with it. But the other one too, you can distinguish between attachment and happiness. I mean, when we hear about got to give up attachment, we conflate it with pleasure and happiness. Oh, I've got to give, as Lama Zopa says, oh, I've got to give up my happiness. I've got to give up my heart, because we don't know the difference. And we can be forgiven for not knowing the difference, because all these things happen like a million miles an hour. We have 1,000 thoughts a second. It's almost impossible to identify all the thoughts as they're coming. But all we can do is start, begin to have some control, discipline, and awareness of what the hell is happening in our mind. But what is happiness? What is suffering? What is love? What is compassion? Give the definitions, and this is what you can study. It's not. I mean, it's pretty fascinating. We're discussing here not the brain, but your own subjective cognitive process itself, your own internal thoughts. What is your best cognitive behavioral therapist you'll ever find? I'm not joking. So the one about happy feelings is very fascinating. The thing the Buddha is saying really is, we hear, okay. The first kind of suffering is really obvious. You have to take the given that attachment is in there and aversion is there. All the states of mind are there. So that because the assumption is I somehow must get only the nice things, and a more brutal way of putting it means I must get what I want, because nice means my interpretation of nice. Hubby's happy slurping his coffee, isn't he? He thinks that's nice, not me. So attachment is this very self-centered mind that's there all the time, one way or another, until we're quite advanced. And all it wants is everything to be pleasant, and all it wants is also what I want. It's what I want. It's very self-centered. When we look at it, we can see that. And it's there all the time. And it's very fragile. It's like a fragile child. And that's why we have a panic attack or angry when it doesn't get what it wants. Now, if you're a quieter kind of person, you'll call it irritation, annoyed, upset, frustrated. And you would never call that anger, but they're mild anger. The bare bones of attachment is it gets excited and goes towards something when it gets what it wants. And when it isn't what you want, it goes away like a shock. Anger's like a shock. That shouldn't be that way. Stop it. We have a panic attack, Anger's like a panic attack. So that we're running between these two all the time. They're fundamental. The other delusions are all branching out from here. These two run the show, Then, of course, we have our virtuous qualities, which are our saving grace, and they mitigate, they calm down the neurotic ones. We have to learn to distinguish between them. And the marvelous thing the Buddha is saying is, virtues are who we really are. You can't get rid of them. But the delusions are nonsense. They're made up rubbish, and then we can rid the mind of them. And that's his method for having these happy feelings in the third category, where the feeling belongs, along with intention, discrimination, is neither negative nor positive. The mechanics of our mind, if you like. Buddha has found, in other words, he's saying basically, okay, so the first level of suffering is related to attachment and aversion. It's always there. But the grosser level is when they don't get what they want, when the bad things happen, when the chocolate runs out. And that's the point now. So when the chocolate runs out and you get the ugly one, we order chocolate cake and you get carrot cake. We are convinced the carrot cake is the cause of the anger, the upset, isn't it? You're convinced that the slurping of the coffee is the cause of the unhappiness, the aversion, and the unpleasant feeling. So this is where, pleasant feeling and attachment come together, and unpleasant feeling and aversion come together. But we practically can't distinguish between them, but they're totally different states of mind. It's fascinating. It's really hard to see the difference. It's incredible. It's very fascinating. So the first kind of suffering is when attachment doesn't get what it wants and the bad things happen. The punch in the nose, the red light, the cake, the murderer, whatever. I mean, and we can see there are degrees, oh my goodness, of unpleasant feelings, isn't it? There's no question about that. So that's the first level of suffering, when the bad things happen. The second level is really hard to see, but we can do the analysis, and it's all based on understanding attachment. So the second kind of suffering, and it sounds really mean of Buddha to point it out like this, is when attachment does get what it wants. But we call that happiness. And it is happiness, but you have to listen to it. This is the point. There we are, wanting to be happy. You're like everybody else. Join the universe, and you want to be happy. We all think because we're samsaric and have a body and the delusions that getting the cake and getting the boyfriend and whatever it is that I like, that's the method. And you're right. So the first level is just simple. When the ugly things come, that's suffering, and when the pleasant things come, you know, when the ugly things come, that's the first kind of suffering. But the second kind of suffering is when the pleasant things come. So why does he call it suffering? It sounds so mean of him. Why does he call it suffering? It's logical. We have to really think, and we know it. We just don't join the dots, you know. So the second kind of suffering is when you do get what attachment wants. So they use the simple example of the chocolate cake. So there you are feeling dissatisfied, which is the energy of attachment. Something's missing. And then you go, well, what's missing? You know, you go, oh, cake, you get all excited. And then suddenly attachment kicks in now and does its job along with all the other parts of the mind, intention, concentration, mindfulness. You go to the cupboard to get the cake. You don't go, oh, why was that coming here? We do. Why am I coming to the fridge? Because you forgot your mindfulness is not working. But your mindfulness is very focused when you want to get the cake, I promise. You won't forget what you're doing, not for 1 second. You'll be super focused. You have clear intention, good mindfulness, good concentration, good discrimination. You know exactly the chocolate cake or the carrot cake. They're all working overtime, getting what attachment wants. We all say we can't concentrate. It's not true. We can. When you're in love with Fred, you can sit there on the freeway having single-pointed concentration on your best fantasies of Fred, and no one will disturb you because you're getting what attachment wants, I promise. So we know how to concentrate. I promise. Okay, so then here you are, suddenly attachment gets excited, and attachment is the emotional, is the dissatisfaction, and then it leads to what's missing and the emotional hunger to get something, and then you think of the cake, and then it starts getting excited. And anticipation. One of the best things about getting delicious objects is the anticipation, isn't it? It's so exciting, and we want to go for a meal. I love going for meals, you know, and you're hungry. And you think about it, you're going to get, you know, someone's coming at 7 to pick you up, and you're waiting, you're excited. Attachment's dissatisfied, but suddenly get excited now because you're anticipating the delicious meal. And you go to the restaurant and you look at all the people, their meals look so divine, look so delicious, and you can't wait. And you order, you're thinking about it, right? You all recognize? Isn't it? It's like that, all excited. This is attachment energy, all excited, anticipating. First it was dissatisfaction. Then it was suddenly, oh yes, meal. Then it was emotional hunger. I must get it, and then anticipation, which feels delicious. And then the point of the whole exercise, you order the meal, and then you start, looking what other people are eating, and oh, I should have ordered that one. You know, you feel disappointed. Oh, mine's so small. Look at your neighbors. You try to be polite. I mean, excuse me. We all understand. So then attachment is all excited, waiting, and we know the purpose of the entire exercise is to get the food here, not here. You don't go there, or you don't just sit and look at it. You know. You've got to get it in the mouth. We know that. So it gets in the mouth. And now this is what happens. This is why you have to distinguish between attachment and pleasant feeling. So what happens is this. Attachment's there in the anticipating, the waiting, the excitement. You can't wait to get the pleasant feeling because attachment's really believing when I get that food, I'll be completely fulfilled and content. Attachment is this lie that lies to us and makes us feel finally I've found happiness, you know. So what happens is you put the cake in the mouth, the food in the mouth, the meal, the chip, the piece of whatever it is, and it does in fact trigger pleasant feeling in your sensory consciousness, your tactile consciousness, the smell maybe as well, maybe even the visual, maybe the cooks make it look beautiful. Those 3 senses are satisfied. The tactile probably not, you don't touch it too much, it just gets messy. Do you understand me? And all the senses are getting they're all experiencing pleasure. They are experiencing pleasure. It's called happiness. So why is it called suffering? Because what happens is attachment's right there. Attachment is not happiness. Attachment is not discrimination. Attachment is not intention. They're all these parts of your mind, all doing their job to get what attachment wants. As they're all serving attachment. And attachment's there, hungrily, waiting. And then when the pleasure comes, this is what happens. This is the heartbreak. The food goes in the mouth, and it is delicious. Your tongue conscious is excited. There's pleasure. But attachment, as it's happening, attachment saying, Not enough, Robina. Have another mouthful. I'm sorry, I'm still not satisfied. And from that moment, it goes downhill. From that moment, and your attachment really believes the next mouthful, somehow that'll bring the happiness, meaning you'll feel satisfied, meaning not continue to crave. So the second mouthful, and then the third one. And as you're doing this, the pleasure, which we're hoping will get more, it gets less. And attachment starting to become distressed. And gradually dissatisfaction is coming again. And then unpleasant feelings are coming again. And finally, when you finish it, and then you leave all the chips on the plate and the ugly gravy, it looks so revolting. What happened to the pleasure? We missed it. The attachment's never satisfied. And so the real point is this, and this is not meant to be fundamentalist, this is scientific fact. You cannot, Lama Zopa puts it this way, you can't grow pleasure. The pleasure that comes from attachment. You can't grow it. It can only diminish and turn into aversion. This is the nightmare of samsaric suffering. Are we communicating? So you've got to see that feeling is one thing, attachment is another. They're different parts of your mind. Nothing wrong with good feelings. As Lama Yeshe would say, the more pleasure, the better, dear. Because you can see all these neurotic, guilty hippies all feeling guilty about having pleasure. Buddha's saying, honey child, you get the blessed pleasure you can't imagine. Lama Yeshe in his Mahamudra book, very rarely the Lamas would do this. They just give you all the technical methods of getting Mahamudra, getting concentration. Lama would describe the bliss, the rapture, the ecstasy. He found all these words. I don't know how he got them all, but he found all these words. He was amazing. That your mind is capable of just getting concentration. We can't even conceive of the brilliance of your mind at that level. We can't even, and that's just concentration. And we've had it in countless lifetimes. We can't even imagine the joy. And the point is, anybody's even had slight pleasure in their meditation, pleasant feelings, rapture, ecstasy, whatever you want to call it. They all say, and this is what Lama says, it's because it's not based on attachment, it's not greedy, it's not frantic, it's not berserk, as Lama says. I mean, even when you're thirsty, just for some water, your mind is berserk because of attachment. When there's no attachment and you're practicing getting some focus and suddenly some joy comes, it's always totally peaceful. But look at the joy we have now. Forget the best sex on the planet. Look how berserk the mind is when you have sexual pleasure, you know. Look at the mind is out of completely insane. But even just having a cup of tea, even just having a bit of chocolate cake, the pleasure, our mind goes berserk, you know. We can't handle pleasure. We don't know what to do with it. You know? We go mad. Are we communicating? I mean, this is just Buddha's analysis. This is my words for it. We don't talk like this in the books. So we should distinguish what goes on in our mind, know what pleasure is, and there's nothing wrong with wanting happiness. The whole the first, second scopes of the Lam Rim is only to use for you to get happy. We feel so guilty. Oh, I shouldn't be happy. I should want others to be happy. Pathetic. Pleasure, unpleasure. There's mental states. They're mental states. And right now, having a body, we don't know how to access them from the sensory point of view unless we get a sensory object. That's very evident. So now we've got the mental happiness and mental suffering. You know, we can't distinguish. So difficult for us. So the pleasure that can grow, which is the point the Buddha is making, is the mental pleasure, the mental joy. So the one method to get that, and that's Buddha's fundamental point too, is to practice virtuous thoughts and actions. Because he says, broadly speaking, he's saying deluded states of mind, attachment, anger, jealousy, and all the rest, they trigger right there, that second, they trigger really unpleasant feelings. Not to mention that they grow the habit of attachment and aversion, and then you do actions on the basis of that that harm others, and they will ripen as unbearable future suffering. It's the literal cause of our future suffering. The type of rebirth, the tendencies in the mind to have more delusions and have a lot of mental pain. or to have physical pain, to have people harm you, and to have an environment that harms you. They are the consequences, karmically, of following non-virtuous thoughts, following deluded thoughts and deluded actions. They're the cause of suffering. They're the suffering now, and they cause future suffering. And the cause of happiness is beginning to have virtue now. It doesn't always feel like it's pleasant, but practicing having virtuous thoughts, practicing having love for somebody, practicing having compassion, practicing forgiving people, practicing patience. They don't feel very pleasing, but we even know even after we've made an effort to do it, we're going to be pleased with ourselves. That's mental happiness. And then long term, they bring the result of literally mental joy in the future. Be born with a happy mind and good experiences. This is the Buddha's analysis of karma and what happens in suffering is and how to get it and how to stop the suffering. Are we communicating? I presume we are. So, but if you're interested in Buddhism, you better learn the nuts and bolts of it. It's not going to come from the sky. Happiness, 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 and wait for it. No, you've got to cultivate it. So I think you have to ask me some questions now, please. People, any old question you like? Because we're supposed to be the whole weekend on this, isn't it? Oh, okay. Just talk about the whole stuff I say. Okay, fine. Any questions? Anybody? Yes, my dear. Yeah.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Okay, darling.
This is very simple. Walk me through eating a piece of chocolate cake or eating a piece of cake or having sex or
Yeah.
whatever
Okay.
to enjoy the pleasure without the attachment.
Okay, good, darling. Sure. Yeah. Okay, you can't do it without attachment yet because it's so deep in our mind. It's not possible to have pure experience of cake at the moment because attachment is very deep. You can't just make it go away overnight. It's an ancient habit, but we can start to practice. This is the point where practice is. So first of all, you've got to have, this is where, like Lama Zopa teaches. Okay. In the very first level of practice in the Lama, the junior school entry level, in the, of controlling your body and controlling your speech, there's no practice there of trying to enjoy the cake. The practice there is basically, in order to control attachments, you basically try, and they have all these methods. They say, for example, see it as caca. See the cake is disgusting. And I think, well, what a waste of time. Why would you bother then? Why would you bother? But they say that's a method because you're trying to, in a very gross way, you're trying to break your habit of seeing it as divine, because what attachment does is make the cake look utterly divine. We've got to understand that's why the cake looks why we get so excited, because there's attachment in us, anticipating it, and it exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake. So straight away, when you have any understanding of emptiness, there's a method right there. You don't believe what you're seeing, but you have to know that. But the very first level, there's no discussion like that. It's just control. You have one or two pieces, and then you would, or you'd think, let's say, for example, the practice would be to know that you're eating in order to live. You're not eating just for the pleasure. It doesn't, and you would get some pleasure. You would have that. You'd have the pleasure, but you'd use control because you're trying to harness the energy of attachment. And that's why the first level of practice is control the servants of attachment, which is the body and the speech. Control the body, and this already is a tremendously powerful practice. It'll calm your attachment down. I mean, it's obvious if you're an alcoholic, you don't just have a little bit of alcohol, you've got to stop having any alcohol, period. And the pain is unbearable. We know it works. Eventually, you'll stop the craving. So it's a practical method. Do you understand me? That's the very first level. Now, the next level of the Bodhisattva path, you can kind of have your cake and eat it too there, basically. And that's why Lama Zopa gives all these techniques to think about it before you shove it in the mouth. So even just to offer it, even just to think, just to think, or even just to think, well, this food, was made in the kitchen by those people, how kind, and the animals who died for it, and the people who grew it, and you just think that, and you have gratitude, and you thank them in your heart. Already that can calm your mind down. Already you're seeing the cake differently. You're seeing it through another lens. You're not just seeing it as delicious cake and waiting for it frantically. Already before you shove it in, you offer it, and then you can offer. And if you've got an empowerment, you have all these practices where you see it as the nature of bliss, you see it as empty, you offer it to all the Buddhas. There's so many techniques that would put atomic bombs under your attachment. You offer the pleasure. I mean, if you have the tantric level, you offer the pleasure. You offer the cake, you offer the thing, and you offer the pleasure. There's so many methods that you can use in your daily experiences. You understand me? And you're mitigating it. You're changing your mind. Do you understand me? That's I mean, all these ones that you've heard, these methods. So then, of course, the other one is having clear, trying to observe your mind and seeing all the anticipation, all the excitement before you get the cake. You know what it's like. You're anticipating, excited, waiting. And you know that's attachment energy, because what it's really thinking is, now I'm going to get happiness, and that happiness is going to last for eternity. Attachment believes the happiness will last. This is because we're seeing it as permanent. That's why I use that example. Always the same. I use Nicole Kidman. Every time I use this, I'm not trying to be mean about her. I read about it 20 years ago when she was still with Tom Cruise. And she said, she was talking about their wonderful family life. I'm so happy. She was so happy, that happiness. And then she said, towards the end of the article, she said, we will be together until we are 80. So what that's saying is attachment, not only are we excited about the delicious thing, especially a relationship, you really, because it is joyful, you do love each other, you feel so close, it feels so natural. And because attachment's getting what it wants, and because it's actually so fragile, we add another lie on top, which is it will last because it's nice now. Of course it'll be nice tomorrow. So that's two delusions there. Attachment is getting what it wants, which is wonderful, but it's very nervous because we're terrified of losing it. So we put this other lie on it. It will last, and it will it's permanent. I'll have it forever. And the same with happiness here. The happiness that comes from the cake, the attachment believes that it'll really give me enormous satisfaction. When we realize it's only the senses, we know if we do the analysis, it's scientifically not true. The senses can never be satisfied. So in that analysis, watch it, observe it. So the only kind of contentment has to be the mental one, where you control the eating and you think, this is so delicious, and aren't I lucky, and aren't I fortunate, and offer it to others, and then you control it and you don't have the fifth piece and you don't wait till you vomit. And observing how the pleasure goes down. And there's nowhere else for it to go but to unpleasure. That's the sad part about the sensory consciousnesses. It's not fundamentalist, it's fact. The best sex in the universe. It can only, if you kept having that sexual contact with that divine man, eventually you would die of exhaustion and revulsion. Do you understand me? You really would. You would. But we don't want to think about it. So observing. Feel the excitement, the anticipation. Know it's a lie. But there still is pleasure. The pleasure will come. So, have it. Then have all these other attitudes. Offer it. See it as empty. Do it with bodhicitta. This is what redeems the actions. And then you will get more pleasure. That's the irony. You'll get more pleasure. We know ourselves. We know if you don't shove it in like greedily, even if it's a nice cup of tea, you'll enjoy it more. The pleasure will be there more. You won't be so greedy, because it's the attachment and the greed that freaks you out. The simple fact is, sensory pleasure can't grow. It can, to the degree that it has an object, it can only diminish. And that's very, very sobering recognition. And this is not religious, this is fact. You understand my point? So the happiness has to come from your mind. As Lama Yeshe says, we have to practice being content. So if you practice every day, knowing you're greedy for the cake, have the cake, watch the attachment, have the pleasure, enjoy it, eat it, but then thinking this is wonderful and this is enough. The senses, your attachment's still hungry. It wants to put more in because attachment's never satisfied. Don't believe it. So say, I am satisfied. And eventually you'll get the habit of literally being satisfied. Mental satisfaction will grow. You can grow mental satisfaction or mental pleasure. That needs practice. It won't come naturally. Do you understand? I mean, I know because I was attached to food and I am still when I was a kid. My mother would say, and I mean, we all know these things, and I would hear it, I'd listen, I'd hear it so carefully. She'd say, Bobsy, the more you get, the more you want. And we know this is the pain of attachment. That's what a junkie is. And we're all junkies for pleasure, junkies for the cake, junkies for sex, junkies for video games, junkies for being praised. And then we're also distraught because the more we get it, the more we want it. This is the nightmare. So we have to learn to be satisfied. And that's mental. That's thoughts. You can't just feel satisfied. You've got to practice thinking it, and practicing it will eventually bring contentment. You've got to have confidence in this process of developing your mind, thoughts. Do you understand, people? This is what Dharma is. And always wanting more, always wanting more. This is the tragedy, isn't it? The food, you're never happy with it. So I know that because I lost weight recently, I think I mentioned, and I went on a special diet called eating less. It's the only way to do it, I figure if anorexics can do it, I can do it too. Do you understand? So I just said you have to control your attachment. So you watch your crazy mind all day. You've had your amount of food. I have to count my calories. I can't eat more than 500 a day because I've got very low metabolism. I have to lose weight with 500 calories. I never get hungry. This is attachment. So I had my delicious breakfast. And as a kid, the only time I thought I was satisfied, and this is the point, was when I was stuffed. I didn't know what satisfaction was. As when my stomach was stuffed, I thought that was satisfaction. And that's how we are with our senses, isn't it? So anyway, I know when I was losing weight, I had to lose weight. I decided I had to lose weight. Better for me as you get older, have all this fat on the body. It's not helpful, I thought. Anyway, I was losing weight, and I was. But I had to control my eating. It was very simple. And so throughout the day, your mind's like a demented person, Around 3 or 4 or 5 in the afternoon, you're going to go crazy, I mean, it's ridiculous. Okay, you can manage it now, but when you didn't even know it was happening. I mean, I remember Oprah, when she's now into Ozempic, she's given up Weight Watchers. They've gone broke. Who wants to go on a bloody diet and just stick a needle in, I mean, she's into Ozempic and all excited. She had this big talk on the television about Ozempic. And she said, I was so shocked, I thought she was quite aware. She said, oh, we can't help it. It's just our brain, she said. We can't help it, she said. It's just our brain. It's not our fault. I was so shocked. I thought she was quite conscious. Do you understand me? In other words, you blame your brain. Your brain's just your mind, your thoughts, never satisfied. And of course, chatting, one of the signs of attachment is you think of the object all the time. Well, food's just an example. And then the feeling distressed, Then you think, oh, just one biscuit will hurt. No, it doesn't matter. Maybe a piece of toast. It's all right, I'll have it. And then when you're really also practicing giving up attachment to food or any object, you have it, you're excited, you anticipate, you have the toast, you have the thing. I'll just have a little bit, you have it, and then you're finished. And then it's all gone like a dream, and you go, I'm back to where I was before. What's happened? What's changed? I'm still dissatisfied. What's the point? It's like a joke. You understand? You don't feel any better. You just feel full. You're still dissatisfied. I mean, it's ridiculous. So we can learn to have pleasure with food and be satisfied. That's good. That's why if you have a relationship with people and you learn to be kind and loving and be satisfied in the relationship, then you will become happy, guaranteed. It means you rejoice in the other person instead of always greedily wanting more from them and being dissatisfied and then finding fault. This is where most relationships go. But you can learn to nourish it and be kind and loving and patient. That's what brings happiness and therefore more contentment. That's the point. That's the whole point. But the big point I'm making is make the distinction between the sensory and the mental. It's tremendously different. But we just think it's all the same. It's me, And the sensory pleasure and the mental pleasure is the point. You've got to cultivate that. And that means with conceptual thoughts. It won't just come from itself. That's why we don't know this in the world. Because we believe the unhappy thoughts. We believe I'm no good. We believe I'm hopeless. So we never get happy. We don't know how to get happy. We don't know how to get happy in our culture. We don't know it's about positive thoughts. We sort of vaguely know it, but we give up. We don't practice long enough, Any questions? Anybody on the room? Yes. It's Mike. Yes.
Venerable Robina, you've helped me realize something which I would like to offer. I'm confessing that I am a rainbow junkie.
Which junkie? What kind of junkie?
Rainbow.
Rainbow.
Since I moved to New Mexico 26 years ago, I saw more rainbows than I've ever seen in my life.
Really?
And for when they happen, they inspire joy, and then they
Good.
go away.
Yeah.
And so I have trained myself to look for the conditions under which a rainbow might happen. I understand when my back must be to the sun. I must look in a certain direction. I must see where it is raining, where the light is falling. And many times I'm disappointed because there's no rainbow. There ought to
Okay.
be a rainbow.
Okay.
The other thing is when I do finally get to see one, I watch for it to disappear because I know
So what's the point of all this you're telling
the
us?
point of all of this is recently I was standing in a sun shower and there should have been a rainbow everywhere. I was getting wet and I realized, oh, I'm in the rainbow. I'm in somebody else's rainbow.
Oh, I see.
So it was this idea of compassion that I could have joy for the fact that I wasn't seeing a rainbow that was going to be impermanent anywhere, but someone else who's looking for one is looking at the spot where I am right
Oh,
now,
good,
and I'm
okay.
getting
So
soaked
you-
by
so you
this
offered it.
rainbow water.
So you offered it to them.
So the original question that I had about attachment,
Yeah.
I see most of the suffering that I see in the people around me and myself has emanated from a loss of connection.
I don't know what you mean. I don't understand what that means. Please
well,
explain what you mean by that. Try to
connection-
using, go on.
To understand what's going on inside of me, my thoughts, my feelings. I can be disconnected because of all of the distractions from wanting to have the pleasure and everything else. And I've seen that people are also disconnected from,
Sorry, what do you mean? You have to tell me, I hear the word, but describe what you mean by disconnected. What do you mean by that?
the illusion of a separate identity that is apart from all else, apart from all others. I think that's one of the
Well, that's the
delusions.
root. We've got to come to the more simple level at first.
Right.
So why are you mentioning this? What's your
I'm
point
mentioning
about
it because I'm trying to understand the three dots that I see that I need to connect are this idea of compassion, connection, and how we overcome isolation, either internal isolation, being separate
So
from
what's the
ourselves.
question? Is there a question? Or are you just telling us this?
What is the relationship between connection and compassion?
Okay. Okay, well, this is in the advanced level. You're talking advanced level. We're talking that, I mean, I'm not being rude, but do you study the Tibetan Buddhist approach or not?
I'm an amateur.
Who?
I'm an
Okay,
amateur.
fine. So what we're talking here is the very first level, entry level, junior school, grade 1. Well, actually, no, we're doing like junior school, high school here. The very first level of practice in Buddhism, like I said, said here, is just to control the attachment to, you simply have less. You calm your mind. You keep your hand in your lap. That's there's no analysis. It's just, with practice, if you don't shove it in the mouth every time, you'll lessen the habit. So it's it's tough love type of habit. That's the first one. That itself is already the antidote to attachment because you're not feeding it all the time. Do you understand? And that will bring some stability. That's the first level of practice. Within that, Buddha would suggest living in vows and not harming others. And this is a method for lessening our own dissatisfaction, becoming more conscious of ourselves and wanting our own happiness. Then we go to the next level, and now we really get into working on our own mind and doing this analysis about attachment and all this analysis I'm giving here, knowing the mind intimately and well using Buddha's analysis and working with it in our experiences. That is what brings, therefore, that again loosens the attachment, loosens the dissatisfaction, and brings more fulfillment and contentment in me. Now, as I keep growing, doing those stages, inevitably, I'm going to start basically all automatically, I'm breaking down the barriers between me and others, because what creates the barriers between me and other is my needs, my neuroses, my attachment, my depression, my anxiety. That stops me from knowing myself. So here we are. This first stages of practice are very internal. They're like the retreat mode, intimately knowing yourself, understanding the pain, understanding your suffering, understanding how to lessen that and therefore become more connected to yourself. But naturally, you're breaking down the barriers between self and other because this stuff cuts you off from others. Or we see them usually the way we see others, and we have lots of attachment and aversion and the dramas and the anxiety, we see everybody else through the lenses of our own needs. So when we rush out to have people because we're feeling lonely, you know, but as we lessen our own neuroses and control our body, speech, and mind, that is the method for becoming more connected with me and therefore more content. And then naturally I'm lessening, breaking down the barriers, and I'm going, wow, we're in the same boat. So you get closer to others, and then you proactively go to the next level of practice where you actively work on developing the virtues. Here you're working on the neuroses, now you're working on the virtues, and that's what brings connectedness and compassion for others. It's a progressive practice for incremental levels of practice.
Thank you.
Do you understand me?
Yes. Clara.
First is to understand our own mind and to get our own happiness. That's what Willie Buddha is saying. Then we can help others get happy. Do you understand? It's clear. Huh? That's exactly right. No, it's absolutely so clear. But often what happens with a spiritual path, people often say, oh, I have compassion for others, but not for myself. It's because we've missed out these first stages of practice. What drives this wish to control my body, speech, and mind isn't guilt, isn't neurotic, is self-respect. Love for myself, as we would say it in our culture. But we miss that in the West. We think it's, oh, it can't just be for my happiness. That sounds selfish. We don't hear it properly. So that's what Buddhism calls it, developing renunciation. It sounds very forbidding, but you're giving up the causes of your pain. And the result of that is your happiness. You understand? We have to welcome that, want that. And then eventually you want to do it for others as well. One step at a time. Yes.
Would you please talk a little bit more about attachment to the body, letting go of that attachment to this life?
Attachment to the body, attachment
to the fear of death,
Oh, okay,
dying,
all of this one,
attachment to the body, letting that go.
Oh no, that's a really good one actually. I mean we've talked a bit about death. I think it was yesterday. We're doing it again next week. But the Buddhist approach is that we have this grasping. We have this strong instinctive grasping at a misconceived sense of self, an exaggerated, distorted, wrong, painful sense of self, which then brings us intense emotional hunger to get what that self wants, because it's limiting us. And then the major, so this attachment at the time of death, the way Lama Zopa puts it, is the main attachment is to this body, because that's what we identify as me. Now, in our materialist culture, I mean materialism in a literal philosophical sense. We are only material. We are only the body. We are only the brain. And so that's what we think we are. So the attachment to this I, this me, and therefore the body. This is the main reason for intense suffering at the time of death. Intense attachment of not being me. Losing this idea of me. It's so primordial. So primordial. So the Buddhist approach is that our consciousness comes from before, our mind, it goes back and back and back. It does not come from a creator. It does not come from mummy and daddy. The brain comes from mummy and daddy, no problem. The body comes, no problem. But our own mind is ours. And it comes from before. And I've programmed it with what's ever in it. This is the meaning of karma. It's the law that runs the universe as far as Buddha is concerned. We program ourselves every second. Negativity produces my suffering. Positivity produces my happiness. It's not moralistic. It's not punishment. It's not reward. There's no concept like that. So lessening the delusions, lessening the fears, lessening the attachment, lessening the anger brings more, therefore, for more fulfillment and brings less attachment. And therefore less fear. Because they're all rooted, as far as the Buddha is concerned, all the negative states of mind are rooted in fear. It's primordial fear. So lessening the fear, then living your life in the framework, this is the Buddhist approach, in the framework of the fact that we are impermanent, becoming familiar with that. We live in denial of it. So anything we live in denial of is only going to cause fear when it comes. That's why we can't cope. So one way of preparing for death, there's extensive teachings about how you deal with the death itself, how to work towards death, how to be ready for death, how to meditate on these different things. But the other one is to live your life in the framework of the recognition that I will die, and death is definite. Time of death is indefinite. Everybody's going to die. And when you become familiar with that, you lessen the fear of it. So then you see you're moving through your life like a dream. You're getting older, you know death will come. So, but if you're living in that way, you die with a peaceful mind. You're ready for the next life. That's the Buddhist approach. If you're a Christian, you look forward to going to heaven because you know God loves you. Whatever works for your mind. But less recognizing impermanence is the way they say it in Buddhism. We have this other misconception deep in our bones, like I said about Nicole Kidman. We're all the same because you're getting what attachment wants. Now, if everything's going lovely, if you're young and your body's healthy and life is happy, it's wonderful to have it. But because we're scared of losing it, we then put a lie on top that somehow it'll last. And we know in reality that things don't last. But if we recognize that's the reality of things and get used to impermanence, then we won't cling so much. And therefore we won't have so much fear. Because it's a way of living your life. You understand? Does that make sense? We've got to do it consciously. Because death is a fact. And that's the thing about aversion, attachment and aversion. Aversion, which is the bare bones state of mind, that just doesn't want a certain thing. It does not want to look at it, does not want to think about it, doesn't want to touch it. And that's why we have all this stress and PTSD, because we can't handle when bad things happen. So we don't want to know about death. So it naturally brings fear. We have to accept, because it happens is the reason to think about it, not because it should make you depressed. So when you think about it and factor it into your life, then it's in the background. It's not like, oh, when's death coming? You know, or if Tom could leave me tomorrow, what's the point of why bother? You know, because if I could die any minute, what's the point? But it becomes something integrated into you. You accept the reality that impermanence is just the way things are, instead of clinging to things that can't last, but to want them to last. That's the cause of the suffering. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? No, doesn't seem like. Go a bit closer to the mic.
Parents and, they're getting close to
That's it.
time of death,
Exactly
but
that.
they're raised, they're Catholic,
Yes.
and they really don't want to talk about death.
No, that's it. That's very common. They're not
Right.
relying, they're not sort of.
They just skirt it. They just don't, yeah.
That's it.
They,
It's so-
like
it's-
what you
That's
said, they're
exactly
gonna
right. So the thing is
live
that-
forever, and
You what, Joey?
like they're gonna live forever, what have you, but it's challenging. Anyways,
No, it's so common. It's so,
Yeah.
and it's all of us. Here we are. We're not, we're all got out. It's exactly what happens. And then there's Kimberly. She's actually got it herself. She's literally called dying. Got a few months, they say. And then we know that death happens out of the blue. So it's like, it's so tragic because we can't. But if they're Catholic, I mean, do they really have? If they have faith in God, they should help them. They start helping them. Obviously.
right.
You ever talk about this stuff with them?
Well, my mom, she believes in heaven. My dad doesn't really talk about it at all. He just, I think he believes he's going to live forever, what
But
have
he's
you.
got
But
faith in God. He's a Catholic too.
yes, yes.
I mean, maybe it's the thing. If you're with your parents,
Yeah.
you should just maybe just bring up the topic. Well, I've been thinking about heaven lately, Mum, and I'm thinking about God. I don't know what you think, but I think God, if God is all knowing, God must be, must love me, and heaven must be pretty amazing. I think I should look forward to it. I mean, you can bring up
Right.
a topic that'll help their mind, because sometimes people are Christian, but they
Okay.
don't go into it too deeply. They don't use it when they need it.
Mhm.
Maybe you encourage them to think about God. I've been thinking about God lately. You tell them to think about God. You say you've been thinking about God. I'm thinking, I mean, that's really, as Lama Zopa says, a major way to help a person who's dying. Attachment's got two main functions. One is to hold on to something. The other one is to anticipate something. Do you understand me? So the one of death, all you're trying to do is hold on to this one. It's too terrifying. But if you can use that attachment to look forward, if you're a Christian, to look forward to heaven, to look for, then you can, all that energy can be transformed and you can relax. And we all know how that, we love looking forward to things. Look forward to heaven. That can
Yeah.
really help their mind if they want to.
Yeah, I guess that's the intention of asking the question, is how I can help them
That's
to
exactly right.
relax
Yeah.
and not be afraid.
That
of
would be a
dying.
major one. If they're
Yes.
Christian, if they've got that view, help them nourish it,
Okay.
by you just telling, just talking, opening up the topic. God, if you have faith in God, God must love you, and heaven, and it must be marvelous. Somebody said, look forward to it. Look
Okay.
forward to it. Because attachment holds on to things, and when you're dying, you can't hold on. It's the most terrifying thing. You can't hold on. That's why it's so painful. But the same energy of attachment, like the cake, you look forward to it. It's all exciting. The mind lifts.
Okay.
That's having.
That's
a
helpful.
really helpful one. I think.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Talking to Mary, her dad, the same thing. To be skillful. What else, people? Questions on here? Anybody in the box, in the chat? Never, not. So, okay, the summary, we'll go into more detail on the weekend, whatever, but this is the essence of it. I mean, I didn't go right at it. I didn't start at the beginning and go through, but just trying to look at the Buddhist explanation of the way the mind works, which is the basis of all his teachings, really. And this one of identifying attachment, distinguishing it from pleasure, nothing wrong with pleasure. And then looking at the sensory consciousness, which is so tremendous for us, trying to get those happy feelings through the senses, that's fine. But to think that they will last, they don't. That's the simple point the Buddha's making. It's quite literally scientifically true that the more cake you eat, the more the pleasure disappears and turns into the opposite, into disgusting. Stuffed stomach, you want to vomit now. I mean, that's an extreme example. So we have to manage that mentally. You do, and that's what it is. You give up alcohol, you've got to stop the alcohol radically, you've got to stop it. But mentally, you change things, you reinterpret the situation. So we have sensory consciousness, which is so dominant. Then we have our mind, and that's where the workshop is. And that's then the happiness and pleasure there can be grown. That's the fundamental point. That's what happiness actually means. We can get it, practicing with virtuous thoughts, practicing not buying into the negative thoughts. And that's the one in our culture where we have this constant conversation in our head about ourselves, not enough, haven't achieved enough, not good enough, always finding fault with ourselves. And these we know these thoughts are just, they don't get invited. Like I say, I've never met a person yet who says, oh, I can't stop thinking good thoughts about myself. We know that. So we've got to practice having positive thoughts. But because the tragedy is, because the negative thoughts come so naturally, we assume they are who I am. We assume they're set in stone. We assume they're the truth. So then we know that 27 people can argue with us and point out our good qualities and say we're nice, and we don't believe it. We want to hear it, but we don't believe it. When one person criticizes us, we believe it 100%, which is the irony of ego. It really shows how the delusions, even if we're nice people, these negative thoughts about ourselves are prevalent, quite prevalent. They're just habits. So to argue with them, literally argue with them. And that's what cognitive behavioral therapy says. And that's even what these people who talk about the neuroplasticity, you can change your brain. But look at the method that you use to change your brain. You change your thoughts. You don't get in there with a scalpel. You change your thoughts. This is all Buddha's been telling us for 2,500 years, But you've got to persevere with it. You've got to persevere and know that positive thoughts, when we have positive thoughts, we're sort of wanting happiness this minute, get all excited. But it doesn't last. You've got to persevere. You've got to practice, We're a work in progress. But have confidence in the method. It takes time. That'll do for tonight. Okay, people. I think there's something to say tomorrow too, all day. Wow. We can rub our noses in attachment, okay? We can go into more detail about how horrible attachment is and distinguish it from the virtues. That's the point. Okay, people. Let's just do these little prayers. Our 90 minutes, nearly 90, has gone like a dream. Look at it, gone like a dream. All the thoughts we've had, they've all gone into the mind and they will not leave. They've gone into the mind. They've gone into our memory. And also we've sowed these seeds. So we think maybe nourish these seeds from this moment forward to continue to develop our marvelous potential for our sake and the sake of others. So due to the virtuous karma of listening to these teachings, may I quickly become this amazing Buddha and be able to then lead other beings without exception into that enlightened state. May that happen. And the next one. And then may this amazing compassion that ripens in this aspiration to benefit others, may it grow in the minds of others and may it never diminish. Okay? And then the little prayer for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, put that up. So Okay, that's a Dalai Lama, so that's fine. So we just think, No, don't say the prayer, we'll just think the words. Close it down. So we just think, those of us who know, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he passed away, and now the Dalai Lama says that his new reincarnation's hanging around somewhere in Nepal. They've got to find him now. So we think, may he come soon and come soon and keep teaching us when he gets old enough. So we can become like him and help others. Jang Trup Sem Chok Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Yu Chi, Ke Panyam Pa Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne Gong Tu Pa Wa Sho. And that's it. I think that's it. And that's it. Thank you so much. See some of you tomorrow or next week. I don't know, or next life, whatever. Thank you, people. Zoomers, happy to see you all. Much love, sweetheart.
Thank you, Venerable.